Good day to you. The 16-bit Mega Drive, or Genesis if you're a prick, had a run of hit Sonic the Hedgehog games. Given Sega and Sonic were so interwoven, it's weird that their follow-up console, the Saturn, never had a proper Sonic game, isn't it? Yeah, it is. But it didn't. Why not? I will tell you. But first, background info. Yuji Naka made the first Sonic game for Sega Japan, but he didn't like it there, so he quit. Sega USA recognised the value of Sonic though, and convinced Naka and several members of Sonic Team to move to the US to work on Sonic 2 with the newly formed Sega Technical Institute, or STI for short, if you're a fan of chlamydia. And who isn't? Am I right? Meanwhile, Sega Japan wanted to develop a Sonic game for the Mega CD, but obviously Naka had gone, so Sega Japan were knackered. Instead, they got Sonic's original character designer, Naoto Oshima, to direct the Mega CD's Sonic CD, which meant at this point there were two different teams working on Sonic games. After Sonic 2, Sega Technical Institute split into Japanese and US contingents. The Japanese team worked in the US under Naka on Sonic 3 and Knuckles, while the US team frantically worked on Sonic Spinball to plug the gap left by Sonic 3 missing its original intended deadline of Christmas 1993. Spinball's rush development is one of the reasons it is crap. Yes, it is. But at least it came out on time. The same Christmas, the Puyo Puyo reskin, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, further fed the planet's insatiable lust for hedgehog-related amusements. Sega also wanted a Sonic title to help sell the forthcoming 32X add-on, and got another team in Japan, which included some junior staffers that had worked on Sonic CD, to work on Knuckles Chaotix, so there were now 3 different teams working on Sonic games. Knuckles Chaotix had begun life as a 1994 Mega Drive prototype known as Sonic Crackers, which saw Sonic and Tails using Chaotix's much-maligned tethering technique rather than Knuckles and his Chaotix pals, Espio the Chameleon, Vector the Crocodile, Charmy Bee, and Mighty the Armadillo. Characters so one-dimensional, I imagine it took me longer to say their names than it did to create them. Although, given Sonic the Hedgehog's design by Oshima has since been admitted to be a case of mashing together Felix the Cat's head and Mickey Mouse's body, we should hardly be surprised. The last Chaotix character I mentioned, Mighty the Armadillo, had actually already appeared in a 1993 isometric trackball arcade game, Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, which was developed by a 4th team, Sega's arcade division AM3. In fact, by this point, it seemed everyone was making something with Sonic in. The companies Ancient and Aspect were both engaged to develop Master System versions of Sonic 1 and 2, and a number of Master System and Game Gear spin-offs such as Sonic Chaos and Tails Adventure. Arc System Works gave the Game Gear Sonic's first racing titles with the Drift series, and even Sega's educational system, the Pico, had titles like Sonic the Hedgehog's Game World and Appaloosa Interactive's Tails and the Music Maker. When they weren't outsourcing, Sega also had internal teams like AM1 banging out kids' rides with games in them, like Waku Waku Sonic Patrol Car and Sega Sonic Cosmo Fighter Galaxy Patrol. There was even a popcorn vending machine with a Sonic game in it, and no, I don't know why. What I do know is, when you look at the developers I've mentioned, AM1, AM3, Ancient, Appaloosa Interactive, Arc System Works and Aspect, it's clear that when they were outsourcing, Sega's execs never got past A in their Rolodex. And no, I don't know if that joke works in Japanese. We've got distracted. After Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles were released for the Mega Drive in 1994, Naka moved back to Japan and the Sonic Team factions were reunited. Naka and Oshima, who you'll remember led development on Sonic CD, worked together again on their next project, Nights into Dreams, for the forthcoming Sega Saturn. They wanted a new challenge, having been full-on with Sonic for 4 years, but despite their new game being built in 3D, it utilised invisible tracks to keep gameplay on a 2D trajectory, as early beta testing suggested it was simply too difficult to control. So, with Sega's success inextricably linked to Sonic, and at a time when the big new thing in gaming was 3D, the guys who'd made the Sonic the Hedgehog games decided that for Sega's new console, they'd make a 2D game with no hedgehogs in it. To be fair, it's not like there was a shortage of people at Sega banging out Sonic games at this point, and so Sega Technical Institute were left to fill the gap with their own Sonic sequel for the Saturn, Sonic X-treme. This concludes the background info portion of this video. Or does it? I mean, arguably, other than me saying there wasn't a proper Sonic game on the Saturn, this could all be considered background info, couldn't it? Bloody words. Right, Saturn Sonic. STI had begun working on a Sonic follow-up a while back, the earliest iteration of which was a story-focused 2D side-scroller for the Mega Drive with an art style more in line with the then-popular Saturday morning cartoon adaptation. Later on, there was a pitch for an isometric title, for which this single conceptual screenshot is all that exists, followed soon after by an attempt at actual 3D for the 32X, known as Sonic Mars, Mars being the 32X's codename during its development. Staffing changes led to momentum being lost on this, but the work was co-opted for a potential 32-bit cartridge-based console developed by Sega of America, codenamed Jupiter. However, Japan vetoed this in favour of the 32-bit CD-ROM-based Saturn instead, so development of the game shifted again. All of these changes and delays meant the team then split in two to try to hurry things along, but this fragmenting of the team eventually led to an unhelpful rivalry between the two Sega of America sub-teams. An external third party was then also brought in, adding further complexity, and by the time Sega of Japan visited to review progress, it was a mess. Plus, by now it was March 1996 and the game was meant to be ready for release before Christmas, but the goalposts for what the game was even meant to be had changed significantly at least 6 times. Of course, this being Sega, there were other teams already gearing up to plug the gap. Sonic 3 had originally been intended to be isometric. As mentioned earlier, Sega had dabbled in that area with the arcade Sega Sonic and would do so again with the Game Gear Sonic Labyrinth. Whilst Sega decided with Sonic 3 not to mess with the winning formula of the game's main series, their early isometric work was built on by external developer Traveller's Tales for what eventually became 1996's Sonic 3D Blast, intended as a sort of swan song for the Mega Drive. However, when it became clear Sonic's 32-bit debut would be delayed, a Saturn version was also developed. Traveller's Tales were asked to make a second Sonic game as well, Sonic R, the only exclusive original Sonic game for the Saturn in fact. A racing game, it was their answer to Mario Kart 64, released in time for Christmas 1997. Sega had also considered porting their 1996 arcade title Sonic the Fighters to the Saturn, to give consumers another 3D hedgehog injection, but it was soon abandoned due to the difficulty in creating a satisfactory replication of it. Meanwhile, back at STI, in an attempt to help move things along faster on Sonic X-treme, the team requested use of NACA's Nights into Dreams engine, which was well suited to their needs, but after 2 weeks productively migrating their game to that, Yuji Naka then insisted they cease all work with his engine, else he would quit again. The reason? The whole thing had taken so long, Naka had finished Nights into Dreams and was ready to give his hedgehog another game, and didn't want the US team piggybacking off his hard work to create a competing, and what he perceived would be an inferior, product. Not that that proved to be an issue. One of STI's programmers, Chris Coffin, had worked himself so hard, he'd literally been living in the office, that he got severe pneumonia. Another, Chris Sen, was told he had 6 months to live. Thankfully he survived, but with the project in turmoil and 2 key members of the team out of action, the decision was made to bin Sonic X-treme and STI was disbanded soon after. A glimpse of what could have been in terms of Sonic in 3D on the Saturn can be seen in the hub world included on the compilation release, Sonic Jam, a repackaging of the Mega Drive games for the Saturn. This was Naka's early work after Nights into Dreams, but with all the delays, it was soon agreed Sega would cut its losses with the struggling Saturn, and Naka and Sonic team would focus on Sonic's true transition to 3D on the Dreamcast, Sonic Adventure, released in December 1998. So there you go. The guy that made Sonic didn't want to make Sonic. Some other people tried to make Sonic, but they took so long that by the time they were getting somewhere, the guy that made Sonic did want to make Sonic. If I'd just said that at the start, this would have been a lot shorter.